Do we know if Mitchell's coming?
He hasn't said otherwise.
I'll give it another minute or two. We're going to give it another 2 minutes. We also meet Brian. Brian's not going to be here. He's excused.
Oh.
Will hopefully prevent it from falling.
Mitch.
Why are there?
Mitchell and Brian.
Oh, okay. But we know Brian's not.
Yeah, we just. Yeah. 1 minute. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I think I'm going to get started. Welcome, everybody, to the Traverse City Planning Commission special meeting. Today is July 16th. I'm glad to see everyone here. Do we need to take a roll call?
Yes, we'll do roll.
Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
Commissioner Deturi,
Here.
Commissioner Heller,
Here.
Commissioner Hershey,
Here.
Commissioner Knapp,
Here.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Here.
Commissioner Swanson,
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell is not here, and Commissioner McGillivray is excused.
Thank you. And as always, I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. The land on which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. Announcements.
Yeah, first and foremost, we have a new planning commissioner. We have Jerry Swanson joining us for his first meeting. Jerry is a member of the city staff. The bylaws do indicate that the city manager, the Planning Enable Act, can serve on the planning commission or have a designee. And for about the last 9 years, it's been Chief Tuller. But Chief Tuller moved, making it kind of hard to attend the night meetings. So Jerry was willing to step up. So he, again, is our GIS coordinator and our technology ninja on the city side. So thank you, Jerry, for joining us.
Thank you, Jerry. Welcome.
Additional announcements, just a reminder, from noon to 8 in the lower level on Thursday, we'll be having our master plan open house. So please come at your convenience if you can make it. Stay as long as you want. You can come and go. If you are planning to make a long run of it, perhaps bring your computer. I've been to a number of these, and there are often slow periods. So the benefit of this is it's an opportunity to truly engage in additional dialogue with the public in a format that's much more productive than these public meetings. Next announcement is our community development block grant draft is out for the public review period right now. So Leslie in our office, who currently is downstairs holding the door open because it's locked for people, she's been working very hard with Wade Trim to meet this tight deadline so that we can take advantage of this new federal program that we're eligible for. So that'll be going to the City Commission, I believe, August 12th. And then just last thing, I had the privilege today to be invited down to Lansing to participate in a facilitated discussion with lawmakers, a couple other planners, agency heads from the area on the topic of housing. It was a good discussion. One thing that I left with is preemption is likely coming. So preemption, in Michigan, the Zoning Enabling Act is the piece of legislation that the state has enacted that gives local units of government the authority to zone. And so for the most part, zoning is left up to the local jurisdiction. Most planners would agree that that's the best way to do this. Every now and then, though, we see the state do what we call preempt local regulation by applying a state regulation to the legislation. An example that you're probably most familiar with is the short-term rentals bill that has been introduced in the past, where they try to preempt you from prohibiting those. Oftentimes, this is driven by local governments creating too much red tape to meet state needs. So recently, 2 examples of preemption include removing some of the regulations surrounding quarries, because quarries are where we get our gravel and our sand needed to make concrete and build homes and buildings and roads and things like that. So the state was finding it difficult to source that gravel because too many communities were essentially stopping it with bureaucracy. The other example within the last year is the siting of renewable energy sources. So they passed a bill that the local governments can't really prohibit solar panels, wind farms, things like that. And so that's what we heard from the legislators today is many of the local units of government are being too slow to respond to the housing need, and they represent the state constituents. And so there has been talks of making a statewide limit on maximum size, requiring that certain residential uses be by right through administrative approval. So things like that are happening. Now, this community has done a lot in that, but we're seeing that in other states throughout the country, like Oregon, Vermont. A lot of these, the state stepped in because the local units of government weren't solving this problem that their state residents were struggling with. So that was one thing that really kind of permeated throughout that. Some other things that I thought were interesting I wrote down to share with you. In Macomb County, they were talking about some research they did there, and what they figured out is every dwelling unit costs $94,000 before a shovel hits the ground because of the permitting process, the drawings, everything that they have to go through. So when people are like, well, where's the $180,000 starter homes? Well, the process itself, you know, half of that is just getting to the point where you could begin to build. So that's not even the construction costs or any of that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Preemption's coming. Yeah, that's about it. One thing they noted is that in the state of Michigan, we had a really big housing boom in the 70s and in the decades actually leading up to that. But because of that, throughout the state, and this doesn't impact us as much, but there is a pretty low quality of housing stock. So we have an issue with quantity. We don't have enough roofs. Many other communities in the state have enough roofs, but the houses are in such poor shape, they're not really that inhabitable. And there are federal programs out there to help with that, but they're not even eligible because they are in such bad shape. So they're working to figure out how they can use state funds to bring these homes that were built under a different time period with different codes up to a level to where they would qualify for additional federal funding. Because a lot of these homes are inundated with lead paint, they're very energy inefficient, they have knob and tube wiring, there's air quality issues and things like that. So we don't, throughout the state, have just a quantity issue, but there is a quality issue with some of the housing that does exist that could be available. So I think that's all that I have for
Does
now.
anybody have any questions about what's being reported?
Did they talk about fixing that last one particularly? I mean, is it just a demo and build? Or are they talking about ways to improve the homes?
Yeah, improve the home. So they're trying to find a way that state funds can be utilized to make the initial improvements to get them to where they would qualify for additional federal dollars for more improvements. Because that's a key thing they want to do is, you know, improving existing housing stock is cheaper than building new housing stock. So that's kind of the low-hanging fruit that the state's looking at. Yep.
One question I have is, so these preemptions, I mean, this is new law that's going to have to come out, and how long does that take?
It could take a while.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a couple different lawmakers who spoke who are kind of working on their own little angles at it. So I think eventually they'd have to come together and create a bill, get it
Could be a
introduced.
while.
Yeah. So no specific details, but I mean, that message was pretty loud and clear throughout.
And did you hear anything about the short-term rental bill and what's happening with that? Was that mentioned at all?
Nope, did not come up.
All right.
Yep.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, let's move ahead to old business. 4A, setting the required public hearing as part of the draft master plan review and approval process. Mr. Winter.
Yeah, so the Planning Enabling Act requires that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing on a draft master plan. So it's a procedural step. That cannot occur until the close of the 63-day review period, which the City Commission authorized, I believe, in June, June 3rd. So that 63-day review period, the notices went out the next day, officially starting the clock. The act has a list of recipients that must receive that letter, noting that the public period is open. So that will end on August 5th. So the earliest that you could hold the public hearing would be August 6th, 2024. So we are required to also distribute the notice to the listed entities in the act. So we are asking that the Planning Commission set a date so then we can notify the public as well as the other parties of when that public hearing will occur.
Are there any questions or comments on this?
I have a motion.
That's what I was going to say next. Who would like to move?
I move to set a public hearing in consideration of the draft master plan with the subtopic mobility action plan included at the Planning Commission regular meeting on Tuesday, August 6th, 2024.
Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oops, public comment.
Oh, dang, sorry.
Going back.
Going back. Do we have any public comment on this issue? Sorry. Okay. Now, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And thank you for keeping me on my toes. New business. A, introduction of a zoning amendment application submitted by Alex McKenzie of Coldwell Banker Commercial Schmidt Realtors to amend Section 1358.01 of the Traverse City Code of Ordinances to allow offices, legal services, business services, insurance, and real estate services as allowed uses in the H1 Hospital District and to set the required public hearing. Mr. Winter.
Yeah, so we did receive an application from a gentleman who is a realtor who's representing a property owner selling a property in the H1 district. And he has had some interest from different parties, but they were looking to use it for an office use. It is interesting because we know that we have a tremendous amount of vacant office space downtown, but this isn't the first realtor developer that has affirmed that there is still a strong market for very small offices. So a lot of the office space that we have vacant downtown is large, occupied by big employers like Haggerty and stuff like that. So there still is that market out there. So he has submitted this application to add those listed uses, primarily office-type uses in the H1 district. So we have provided for you the intent of that district, as well as some of the uses allowed, where that is located, and some other uses that are in the district that are not truly hospital for consideration as well. Because there are a lot of uses in there that have migrated away from simply healthcare. For instance, we allow financial services, churches, and things like that. So, again, the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act and the Charter for the City of Traverse City do require that when an application for a rezoning or a text amendment is received, that the Planning Commission will hold a public hearing. So that is the ask of the Commission today, is to set that public hearing again for the August 6th, 2024 meeting.
Any questions or comments? Do we have any public comment on this matter? Do we have a motion? Oh, Ms. Sandra.
I have a question.
Okay.
And I am presuming that this is the Milliken Medical Practice building there on Circle Drive and perhaps some adjacent properties? Is that a correct understanding?
You know, I honestly don't know for certain which property it is. He just said which district it was in. So he doesn't have to identify a property because it would be applicable to the whole district. So, yeah.
And my question has to do with reconciling this with some of the initiatives within our draft master plan, which, if I remember correctly, are identifying healthcare as being an economic engine for the area and a very critical economic factor for growth looking forward. And I just wondered if we look 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, are there considerations for preserving adequate space for that sector to grow in a way that's efficient for our healthcare hub, Mother Munson, and also convenient for the people who use those facilities, both practitioners and patients?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately that would be a determination for the planning commission to make. Having spoken with the applicant, yeah, they're currently, as far as the economic driver, he's not having any luck finding any tenants in the healthcare field. So, and the master plan does recognize the value of healthcare in the city. It does speak specifically, though, to allowing healthcare services outside of this district,
Yes.
just to provide greater access to healthcare throughout the city.
There, I can only recall if indeed we're talking about a building with medical offices that is literally across the street from the door to the hospital, that it's sort of a unique property in that sense, and would be very difficult to replicate that access for caregivers and patients in main hospital facilities. So I guess some of that is contingent upon which property we're really talking about. And I understand we're not zoning property by property, so.
And I guess the question is, right now, in that zone, we're allowing other types of businesses that aren't health-related, and I don't think there's anything in the new master plan that would change that. Is that correct?
I would agree.
Yeah, so if they're allowing veterinarians, if they're allowing banks, restaurants, and housing, you already have non-health-related uses.
It makes sense to me. If it's the one that we think we're thinking of, it's been vacant for a while now, or at least the sign's been up. Maybe it was
It's
not
been-
vacant,
No,
but.
they moved about 3 months.
Oh, okay, so they tried to sell before, probably then. But yeah, I think that makes sense, it's a good building, it's a great space, and I would hate to have wasted space like that. I think the one thing that I'll note is, I think this could potentially, maybe, drive down the costs of the right downtown rents and property, which we are obviously seeing people moving away from because it is becoming so unaffordable, like Jenny's moving down the block a couple blocks. So maybe opening up this avenue to encourage more office space in an area that already has office space makes sense to me. So I do have a motion, but I don't want to.
Does
Shut down
anybody else have
conversation.
anything to say before the motion or ask? And as a reminder, we're just setting the public hearing through this motion. We're not making any decisions. So go ahead, Anna, with your motion then.
Okay, I move that the request initiated by Alex McKenzie of Coldwell Bank Commercial Schmidt Realtors to add offices, legal services, business services, insurance, and real estate services under section 1358.01, uses allowed in the H1 Hospital District, be set for a public hearing at the Planning Commission regular meeting on August 6th, 2024.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Oh, was there one opposed?
No.
Yeah, okay, motion carries. Thank
Roll
you.
call.
We need a roll call vote then.
Commissioner Anderson,
No.
Commissioner Deterry,
Yes.
Commissioner Heller,
Yes.
Commissioner Hershey,
Yes.
Commissioner Knapp,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Yes.
Commissioner Swanson.
Yes.
Thank you. Where am I? B?
Mhm.
Introduction of a zoning amendment application submitted by Andrew Mollison of Alliance Architects, authorized agent for the Traverse City Housing Commission, to rezone the property located at 10200 East Carter Road and commonly known as Orchard View Apartments be rezoned from RC Residential Conservation District to R3 Multiple Family Dwelling District, and to set the required public hearing. Mr. Winter.
Yeah, thank you. So this property is owned by the Traverse City Housing Commission. It's on the northwest quadrant of the city, bordering Elmwood Township, and is located in Leelanau County. So it's an existing multifamily affordable residential development consisting of 22 dwelling units, 1 and 2 bedroom units, I believe. No, sorry, 3 and 4 bedroom floor plans. So this is somewhat unique. You don't see apartment complexes with that many bedrooms typically. So these are affordable for families primarily with that many bedrooms that they're trying to serve. It was approved in 1991. At that time, it was zoned multifamily, and it was approved under a SLUP, a special land use permit. In 1999, the city adopted a new zoning ordinance, so sometime thereafter, and it was when that little square was rezoned to residential conservation. It does kind of strike me because it represents spot zoning. You're supposed to really have a district when you zone per the Zoning Enabling Act, but the Zoning Enabling Act changed in 2006, so it really could have been sometime between 99 and 2006. So what is there right now really isn't even allowed. So the rezoning made it non-conforming. At this point, the Housing Commission is in a position to possibly expand their services of providing affordable housing on that location. They would have an application that they would need to turn in by October 1st. That's the deadline for the state funding for affordable housing each year. I think one of 2 deadlines, the other one being in February. So they're working on putting through that application, but they would need the necessary multifamily zoning in place to expand, well, not only to expand, but also to legalize what is currently there right now. So that what they would like to do is add to their dwelling mix by incorporating 12 2-bedroom and 12 1-bedroom units, so it doesn't just have to be for large families or multiple roommates and things like that, but still meeting that affordable threshold. They would turn one of the existing units into like a community space for the tenants, bringing the total of affordable dwelling units up to 57. Now, it is important to note that a rezoning is changing the classification of the property. It does not approve a site plan, so you guys aren't approving it. But in this case, we know what the property owner is trying to achieve. They have a long history of successfully providing affordable housing in the city. They're equipped and skilled to do so. So they're looking to expand on that mission. And the nice thing is, they can't promise anything forever, but if it does get the funding to become affordable housing, I believe it'll have a 40-year deed restriction. For at least the next 40 years, it'll stay affordable housing. It's not into perpetuity. So with that, the staff report provided the maps, the description of the property and some of the details surrounding it. To the north and the east is low to mid density single-family dwellings, primarily located within Elmwood Township. The south and west is a combination of different housing types, all part of the Morgan Farms PUD. So you have very small lot, single-family homes. Directly to the south, you have townhomes. Then throughout the balance of that property, you have a mix of different single-family detached homes, duplexes, and multifamily components as well. So the aerials provided, the existing zoning is provided. You'll notice it only includes Morgan Farms and the subject property because we don't have in GIS the zoning for the other municipalities. We're kind of in a unique place in that our decision should be guided by the master plan, and we do have a master plan in place, but in the next month or two, we may have a new master plan in place. So for both this and the previous agenda item, I did look at both master plans and put that information in there. You will note that under even the new master plan for that future land use category, it talks about it being a lower density residential. And sometimes when people think multifamily, they automatically think that's high density. But when you look at the size of the property, the number of dwelling units, it pales in comparison to the density that our single-family neighborhoods exhibit. So in my estimation, that would still be considered low density when you look at the number of dwelling units per acre, much lower than what we allow in the rest of the city. And that's illustrated there on the table that was provided for you. For your benefit, we put together a table that lists the dimensional standards and allowed uses under the current zoning, as well as that which is, would be allowed under the proposed R3 zoning. And just note, when it says uses allowed by right in that table, I put an asterisk, because this is just a simplified list. There are conditions in that list that are applicable, but it just makes it too cumbersome to kind of look through. But if you want to know about those, they are in fact in the R3 section of the zoning ordinance. So then with that, there are 6 questions that have traditionally been asked since before I started at the city, so as practice, we've kind of been including them whenever the Planning Commission is evaluating a rezoning request. So with that, again, the Zoning Enabling Act requires you to set a public hearing. Setting a public hearing is not a decision on the matter, but per law and following due process, that the Planning Commission will hold that public hearing, after which they can deliberate and make a decision, which ultimately is a recommendation that will go to the City Commission to be introduced and at least 2 weeks later possibly enacted. And I do note that the Executive Director, Carl Fulmer of the Housing Commission, is available, so if there are any specific questions for him as the applicant, he can be ready to address the Commission.
Yes.
Well, with Katie's assistance, perhaps I can share my vacation photos from this afternoon and just add a little bit.
Can you speak to it? We'll bring it next time. We're not set up for it because we didn't have it in time.
Sure.
So,
So this is
Oh, it
just,
looks like,
But we do all have it.
We all have
So I
it.
can
so
have
they
it.
can, yeah, if you can
Oh,
speak to it,
lovely.
I'll have it set up
Absolutely.
for the next packet when we hold the
That's
public hearing,
great.
and then we do it. But if you can speak to it now and they can look at it,
definitely,
we'll go from there.
definitely. Well, the reason that I did a trek out there was simply because I hadn't seen that property in probably 20 years. And I was very curious to admire it. I was thrilled to see this kind of a proposal to expand our stock of affordable housing, and it made all sorts of sense. But I was curious mostly about the current residential conservation zoning and whether anywhere along the line that there might need to be some considerations for drainage or erosion or, things that we might not ordinarily be addressing. And so the photos that I provided simply showed a wonderful family community, complete with bicycles on the sidewalks, and it was people and dogs, and it was clearly a well-loved community, and seemed to have a great sense of people knowing each other. And when I looked outside the perimeter fence, and within it also, there did seem to be some fairly sharp drop-offs into the areas where I think you were proposing some of the new buildings go. So I was curious about that. And then, of course, outside the perimeter fencing, we have Morgan Farms steeply uphill and steeply downhill. So it's kind of surrounded by that. And then I also noted that just west of the property, further up this ridge, and I know anyone who drives west on 72 knows the ridge, and I would guess that Carter Road comes out on 72 roughly halfway up the elevation of that ridge, and right about where the runaway truck ramp is, I think. But so in terms of the train, it does seem to be something that might need extra attention to preserve the land itself and prevent drainage
would
issues.
you like to hear from the applicant?
Well, I thought I was going through the photos, and I'm not quite done yet.
Okay.
And then the other things I noted is that further west, there's a 42-acre plot that's being sold off for 66 home sites by Mark Hagan, so I don't know if that impacts this proposal or not. And then downhill to the east, there's not only a city park, but also a secondary, much smaller condominium complex I was impressed by the number of on-site water retention attempts through Morgan Farms. I thought they had dedicated quite a significant part of their central land to what a novice like me would call a rain garden or a swale, but they have certainly been sensitive to that. It also appeared to me that they had a lot of impermeable surface. And I'm going to be looking for some information about, our plans for permeable and impermeable surfaces if we decide to put further housing on our property. So, is there anything in the pictures that I missed?
So the density and impermeable surfaces one, the one with that title, is that Morgan Farms we're looking at?
Yes, it is.
Okay, okay.
Yes, it is.
I just was like,
yeah.
that can't be this.
No,
old.
no,
No.
no, no,
Yeah.
no, but it made me wonder about runoff from the bottom. Depending upon what's happening with the 42 acre
Would you like the
some more to come.
applicant to answer some,
I would
a
love
few
to
questions?
hear from you,
What specific
sir.
questions, please?
Hi,
State
everyone.
your name.
I'm Carl Fulmer. I'm Executive Director of the Traverse City Housing Commission. And I was director of the commission 20 years ago when our office was at Orchard View Apartments. So I'm fairly familiar with Orchard View. To speak to drainage and runoff, yeah, there are some steep grades on the site. What we would propose is really not impeding, certainly on the steep grades to the west, which is going up the hill towards Morgan Farms residences. What we thought was a drainage basin in the center of our site was planned as a baseball field. We didn't know this until we looked at plan sets from the early 90s. And so our larger building would be located in that, what would have been a baseball field. The site is 9.4 acres, and we would propose ultimately, I think Sean said 57 units. That's a little on the high side. It'd be between 50 and 55 units. So the density is still 6 units an acre or less, and these are multifamily units, so it does take up less acreage to put the multifamily units. We'd improve the property. I do want to state, this is public housing. This was built, when you hear public housing, this is HUD financed housing, built in the early 90s. HUD is now trying to get out of the public housing game. It's very expensive. HUD provides an operating subsidy and capital fund allotment for public housing properties every year. It's really not enough money to adequately maintain and operate properties over time. So what we would be doing is converting this to a privately held property like we did Riverview Terrace a couple years ago. It would get a complete facelift for the existing units, and we'd add approximately 30 units to the 21 units that exist presently. So we're looking at 50 to 55 units ultimately. We don't have an interest in building more on the 9.4 acres. Because there's a lot of arsenic contamination on the site, which definitely complicates the construction of affordable housing when you're using public monies. It was, as the name denotes, an orchard. So there's certain limitation. We also don't really want to impede on the views of the Morgan Farms houses to the west that are up the hillside. And what we're planning for the property would certainly be in no way restrictive of their view shed or anything. So I think what we've come up with is a fairly thoughtful, respectful plan that doesn't push the envelope for R3 zoning. R3 zoning was, I think, a recommendation of city staff. We weren't really sure what to do as far as redeveloping Orchard View and converting the public housing, which is kind of a HUD mandate, to privately held housing that's affordable over time. Sean did say we would have what we call a LURA, which is a land use restrictive agreement in place for the property. I said 40 years to Sean, it's actually 45, I just found out from our development partner. So it would be affordable for the future for 45 years. I can't tell you what would happen after 45 years, but there would be a restrictive agreement recorded against the land. So that kind of gives you an overview.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other questions of the applicant? So, any other discussion amongst us? before I
I'm
open it?
sorry, it's been a while. Would we review the site plan or any of the plan of the development?
Nope, so the only site plans that come to the planning commission are the ones that are PUDs, special land use permits, or any development that generates more than 500 trip ends a day. And this unit count would not hit that threshold. It's more like the 65 to 70 units is when it hits that threshold. So it would be reviewed by staff, but all the applicable standards would be met, would have to be met to issue permits. And so that's not just the zoning permits, but they would have to get a soil erosion permit from engineering. So they'll review the grading plan and all that. They'll have to get a stormwater permit to make sure that the stormwater is contained on site and things of that nature, keeping in mind that it was redone in 2019. So it's much more stringent now. And this particular project will require, keep in mind this was built in, or approved in 91, they will have to bring the whole site up to current stormwater standards. So that would hopefully address any mitigate any existing problems that are there today. So just because staff reviews it doesn't make it any less of a barrier for
Process.
approval or process, yep, than the planning commission. Yeah.
So am I hearing correctly, this is the only time that this proposal comes to the planning commission?
At
Well,
the
it'd be a
public
public hearing.
You'll have the public
Okay.
hearing,
Public
yeah.
hearing.
So this, no decision is being made today, just setting the public hearing. Setting a public hearing is a requirement, so setting it is not a blessing of the
Yep.
request, it's just a requirement by the state. So in some communities, and we've talked about this, since it is required, staff just notices the public hearing. So it cuts a month off on approval time for some of these developers, and time is money. You know, if we want affordable housing, we need efficient processes. That was one thing that was talked about again today at that roundtable in Lansing. So
So there, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'll make the motion.
Now we have to have public comment first.
no
No,
motion.
motion.
I move that the request initiated by Andrew Molson of Alliance Architects authorized applicant for the Traverse City Housing Commission to rezone the property commonly located 10,200 East Carter Road and commonly known as Orchard View Apartments from RC Residential Conservation District to R3 Multiple Family Dwelling District to be set for a public hearing at the Planning Commission regular meeting on August 6th, 2024.
Do we have support?
Second.
Is there a public comment on this issue? State your name and address.
Hello, my name is Azadrill Stavis. I reside at 2931 North Lamb Road in Interlaken. I'm a non-resident, but as usual, as I speak to you here today, I do not speak about something that has any borders. I just wanted to say, even though you're not making a decision today, that because we know that our housing issues are so critical in our area, that I hope that this board, when they get the opportunity to do so, will approve this plan, because we're at a really, really critical stage right now. And if you get out there and you go tread through the mud and you talk to some of these people, a lot of them will tell you that we're lacking in single apartments where they can't find somebody that they trust to be able to rent a bigger space. And so I think that this would be a really good opportunity for those people. So that's what I came here to say today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, go ahead.
Carl, can I ask a question? And I don't know, I'm putting you on the spot, so you don't maybe have the data for you.
Okay.
But there was a delta, a gap. I remember when Tony spoke to the planning commission before, this was years ago, about how many vouchers that they get each year and how many they're able to fill, which is a huge difference because there just aren't dwelling units to put the people in. Is that correct?
And most of what we're seeing about a 50 to 60 unit gap for 1 and 2 bedroom units, and that's why the plan for Orchard View, We have all 3 and 4 bedrooms there presently. Well, no, I misspoke. 3 and 4 bedrooms are in the 4-unit townhomes, and then we have 1 2-bedroom accessible unit in a set-aside building that also is our maintenance department as well. But, so the new units that we would be proposing would be predominantly 1 and 2-bedroom units to help fill the void that we see for our voucher program. Because we have folks we issue vouchers to for 120 days who need a 1 or 2-bedroom unit who can't either find a unit available or a landlord that will participate in the voucher program. So,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments? And may I suggest that before the public hearing, if there's any specific questions for the applicant, maybe send them in ahead of time to Katie?
Send them to Katie.
To Katie, and then she can send them to the applicant to be answered at the public hearing.
And if we get them far enough in advance, we can compile all the answers as well and put them in the packet. So it's just a matter of timing.
Yes. So do you want to set a date where you would like to have these questions by in order to get them in the packet?
By next Friday would be most helpful, because that gives us until the following Thursday to get answers and get it in the packet.
Okay, so please send your questions by next Friday to Katie. So we have, for setting the public hearing, a motion and a second?
I do have one thing I want to say.
Yes.
I think this is the exact kind of project that we're looking for. I think that it aligns really well with the master plan and the new draft master plan. I think it would be a grave error if we do not pass projects like this, because then it means that we're not standing behind our goals of expanding accessible housing to the region. So I love it. It'll look better than this weird quasi-baseball field lot. In that aerial picture, the second you said that, I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I appreciate it. And that's all.
Certainly fits in with our master plan goals of affordable housing, so.
And RC, I had never even, like, no. What a no.
All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor for setting the public hearing? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
thank you, everyone.
And thank you, ma'am. All right, so the last discussion item is C, discussion on the June 18th, 2024 housing workshop by Flywheel Momentum and the Michigan Association of Planning at the City Opera House. I think most of us were in attendance at that meeting.
Yeah, so thank you for your attendance at that joint meeting. I was pleased to see so many city officials show up and be part of that, as well as our neighboring jurisdictions. But this is the first meeting we've had since then, and this usually would be a study session, but we had to set some public hearings, so we changed it to a special meeting. But nonetheless, we want to provide you guys a space if there was any commentary or discussions that you wanted to bring to the table as a result of what was presented at that workshop. Both Ryan Kilpatrick and Leah Dumichel, the presenters, they were present today in Lansing as they continue their work throughout the state on this issue. And for the public and planning commissioners alike, just note that that presentation was recorded and live streamed from Leah, so that can be watched on Traverse Area Community Media's website. And I think if you go to the city's Facebook page and YouTube channel, although we stream them live, I think they get thumbnailed there that you can watch them through those outlets as well.
Certainly be well worth watching if you didn't attend. And to anybody who's watching, it's well worth watching. Who has comments about that particular meeting? Ms. Anderson.
I was really fascinated by the idea of adaptive reuse of short-term rentals. And I don't have complete notes on the context of that comment, but if some of the commentary that we're hearing from developers recently is that perhaps we have overshot in terms of the market's ability to absorb short-term rentals, and whether there are programs that could convert some of those into year-round. I would be very interested in learning more about that. approach?
I don't remember Ryan talking about that. It slipped my mind, but
I don't
I don't.
I don't either. I do remember him talking about converting office space
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
residential. The nice thing with I mean, this in the field of planning is a topic that gets debated quite a bit with the short-term rentals. You know, we keep them out of our residential neighborhoods, which I think is the most appropriate thing you could do. I think we're a little too liberal with the way we allow them in the non-residential districts, but that argument that we're having a housing crisis, why are we allowing too many short-term rentals? That's an argument most people know. A lot of planners are like, well, at some point, the market's gonna get saturated, and those are gonna be existing dwelling units. There is no adaptive reuse. We don't have to do any work to make
Yeah.
them long-term
I
renting.
think that was the
You
option.
just need a willing property owner.
Trailside 45 is already being sold
Yeah.
as residential with the opportunity to short-term rent if you choose, but there are people that live there year-round, so.
And I've talked with the individuals involved towards the end of 8th Street near Munson, that new building that went up. That was originally conceived in concept as all short-term rentals, and they're not selling them for that purpose. So again, they exist, but now we need the price point to come down, which is starting to, but it's still pretty astronomical,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Would there be incentives that could be offered to accelerate the market action? No, I think of the way development rights have been preserving farmland in townships around us. This is sort of the inverse of that, that we somehow have figure out funding to essentially acquire those short-term rental rights and convert into year-round house. I'm interested in any ideas.
Probably the closest thing that you could do for that would be the community land trust model, which the city hasn't really leaned into much. There was a lot of legislative changes last year, so a lot of new things were thrown at the city commission, such as, and some of these existed but got modified, but like the Neighborhood Enterprise Zone, Attainable Housing Act, Residential Facilities Act. They're all new tools, and Community Land Trust is one. It's been around since before last year. But it's just now starting to really take hold in this region. I know they established one in Leelanau County, and Housing North is very active in that. But the nice thing with the Community Land Trust is that it doesn't have to just be for short-term rentals converting. You know, if there's other opportunities where there's a single-family home. The other thing is, if there was a community land trust started here, it wouldn't have to stay within the Traverse City boundaries. It can be cross-jurisdictional. So there's a lot to learn about it, and I'm not the one right now that would feel confident explaining it compared to more informed partners that we have out there. But that may be something as the city commission is going through its strategic planning, and I'm sure housing will be brought up, you know, to look at these tools. I've had discussions with the city attorney about that. I think she's working on some informative pieces for the commission on these different acts and tools. The other thing that popped into my head today at the event is the state has a housing readiness grant program, which when it was first introduced, we were at the tail end of our housing zoning reform, and that's what it was really adopted to help communities fund the work to go through that process. Because you got to keep in mind, most jurisdictions don't have the staff that we do, especially in this region, you know, so they need to pay outside help to do it, and that's why this funding is available. But they have started evolving that program, as they were talking about today, so it may be worth exploring with the Planning Commission if there's funding available where we could get people to help guide us, because the Attainable Housing Act is an act that allows homes to get a tax break if they provide rental rates or sale at an affordable rate, and that's all defined in the act and stuff like that. That one is for projects that are 4 dwelling units or less. In the past, a lot of the funding has been for big projects, so it's nice that these small ones are available, because potentially you could have someone build an ADU who wants to make it affordable, and they could offset the the costs in their taxes by getting this tax abatement essentially. But this is where the planning commission comes into play. You have to establish a district where it would be eligible. The other one is very similar, except it's for 5 or more units. So when you're getting up to the bigger projects, that's the Residential Facilities Act. So, and I've spoken with the city attorney about this, we'd like to work with the planning commission to identify where is it most appropriate to get more housing? Where do we want to incentivize the housing? Because that's truly planning. We could wait till a developer comes and asks us, but then we're always playing catch up. Or we could help direct the developers to meet our needs. And I think that's the angle that I would advocate for. So,
So once we.
I don't even know if I answered your question. I just started talking.
No, I mean,
To be
it's all
honest.
relevant.
Okay,
and-
yeah,
and
so-
One thing I would add on, is it timely for us to hear from our short-term rental ad hoc group on what they've been up to? Could we put that on an agenda, or is there nothing
There's
yet to
nothing to talk
report?
about yet. We just haven't had the chance. I mean,
Okay.
Katie just last week brought over the list of committee members that we were
Oh,
working
and
on.
who's on the committee?
Not by name, just by like title. Like we had you guys had provided to us, short-term rental operators, property managers, residents, realtors.
We have to find people.
Okay, so we're still in the formative
Mhm, yes.
stages of
But,
that.
but once the master plan is approved, and of course, housing is one of our goals, could we have some kind of a learning session, I don't know how else to put it, about all these things you were just discussing, about land trusts, so we can learn more about it?
Yeah, and I will talk with the city attorney and see what she's creating for the city commission.
Yeah.
See if that's something I can present, or if it's better if she does, or maybe we bring, Yarrow Brown back in, or
yeah.
someone like that. So
That
yeah,
would
we
be
can definitely do
great.
that, because, again, these tools were enacted specifically to help us provide affordable housing.
And maybe they will be part of this preempt anyway. So, like, there's always that option that we can take our own initiative, because what if the state decides nobody's moved quick enough in the last year and decide to do that?
That could take
themselves.
years, though.
The only other thought I had from that session, which I thought was really great, aside from the temperature in the Opera House.
Was it hot? Was it hot or cold?
Oh my gosh, it was so cold. I was using the
Freezing, it was like being in
I was
a-
using the tablecloth as like a blanket. It was so cold. Was the zoning atlas. I thought that was a fabulous idea. It makes a lot of sense. Everyone is trying to work in silos, and the entire region has a housing crisis. So if you are comparing the work that everyone is doing through an atlas, I just don't know why we didn't start doing this decades ago. Because it makes sense to me. I went to somebody that also deals with like planning downstate, and she had not heard of it before. And so it is like up and coming, and I think it's really great. And we could be on the earlier side of that if we wanted to. And I just think it's a fabulous idea.
Yeah, so in the state of Michigan, because it's a national effort, as you know, they piloted it in the Grand Rapids area with 3 counties. So there seems to be a desire for this region to be the next iteration of that. So we did have a meeting with Housing North, myself, and some county officials last week to discuss it, possible funding mechanisms. That's the key there, is the funding it. But again, that housing readiness grant, now counties are an eligible grantee, and before this recent revision, they weren't, so that may be a possibility to fund something like this. It's a matter of scale at this point. We want it to be big enough to be effective, but not too big that we can't afford it, if that makes sense, because we could just do Grand Traverse County, but we're not an island. It is a little, in housing, a regional issue. So it'd be nice if we could get 3 or 4 counties adjacent to each other working on it.
One thing I want to say is I am proud of all of us, because a lot of the suggestions that they made at that meeting were in our zoning amendments that we sent to the city commissioners. So we were definitely on the right track, is what I came away with from that. So kudos to all, and let's keep it up.
There was another item mentioned at the session that I thought possibly had some legs, and it was legislation around how we uncap or don't uncap taxable values and step-ups in cost basis, if indeed we have people who are essentially trapped in their current overly large homes by fear of increased taxes. Did you hear anything about that in Lansing? Was that
No, I
on the
didn't
radar?
today, and I was wishing something like that would come up, because not only are we dealing with the uncapping that keeps a lot of people, as you said, living in their home and they wish to downsize, because the other thing that I struggle with is if you're providing long-term housing, renting it to someone, why can't you have PRE? I mean, that raises the rent each month like $400 to $500 because that property owner now has non-PRE taxes. But whether you own it and live in it or rent it and live in it, that should make no difference on your service demand that those taxes pay for. The issue is so PRE is principal resident exemption, so if you own your home and you live in it most of the time, you pay less in taxes than if it's a second home or a rental property. About 40% more if you own it as a landlord in taxes. But all that delta between PRE and non-PRE, all of that money goes to the school districts. So the school districts have been because I asked a lobbyist once about this who lives here, and is very familiar with our housing situation. Have there ever been any efforts in the past? And so it's the school lobby that opposes it because it would affect their funding, which again, kind of strange in that you're taxing people more because they don't live here and your kids aren't using those schools, because otherwise if they were, then you wouldn't be taxing them that more. So I don't know.
It is a crazy system, but it's
Yeah.
the one we got.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that's hard too for municipalities and other taxing jurisdictions is there's a cap to how quickly your taxes can go up. That's why your taxable value and your assessed value if you live there is different. But there's no cap on how hard they can fall or how fast they can fall. So when you have like an 2008 housing recession, property values may plummet real quickly, which drops the taxable value. And even if the assessed values start going up, you can only have your taxes increase ever so slightly. But when you're a municipality, you still have to provide the same level of service, just with less funding for a long time.
May I ask one more? And then I promise I'll stop. It seems to me as though one of our real areas for focus should be first-time home buyers, if we are interested in encouraging home ownership. And I know there are debates about whether that is a valid goal or not, but if it were to be, I'm kind of wondering what tools we might have to work around that, and also wanted to just raise a case study out of Cincinnati there, where the city itself operated essentially a rent-to-own program. So they rehabbed homes that needed restoration. They got them into rent-ready condition. They rented them to tenants who eventually, after a period of years, were able to, through rent credits and their personal savings and salary advances, were able to get a traditional loan. And then, that funding from their traditional loan went back into the pool to help more renters become owners. And it was a fascinating and highly successful program. I understood from Tony Lentich that the state of Michigan doesn't allow rent to own. They think that there's potential for fraud. And I just, again, your report from Lansing, and is there anyone that would there be an interest in this body in pursuing something that would specifically support first-time home buyers? Is that worth even putting energy against?
I would say, so yeah, I'm going to try to work through the questions. It really is more of a policy decision of the city commission, because it's spending city money. It's not a land use decision of the planning commission. So, if it has merit, that would probably be the best venue to bring that up with. Cincinnati has a very large MPO, and they're the core community, so they would be a CDBG grantee as well, because I believe CDBG funding can be used for down payment assistance. So that is a possible eligible expense. We heard from at least one city commissioner who was pretty adamant against that, so that's a discussion that needs to occur again at the city commission level. It is true, Michigan is, every state's different. So what you see happening in one state, we may be prohibited through our legislation. So a lot of states have inclusionary zoning, which means you have to include 25% at an affordable rate. That's prohibited in Michigan. So we can't do inclusionary zoning. Again, going back to that community land trust, that may be able to operate in a way that is similar to what you're saying, Jackie. Just going to dabble up top because I don't know a whole lot about it, but like if you own a home when it's in the community land trust, and you usually have to have some sort of income level to be eligible to buy, you can deed it to your heirs, or I don't know if deed's the right word, but if you pass away, you can heir it to people. You can improve it, you can do additions and stuff like that. But essentially, you own the house, the land trust owns the land. And you can sell the house, but there's only a certain amount of profit that you can make. The difference there goes back in to help subsidize another future homeowner on another property in the future. So that's how that program can help sustain itself over time. So that's where I would add. Do you want something to add?
I was just going to say that it's funny that you mentioned Cincinnati, because Sean and I both went to the Congress for New Urbanism Congress that was held in Cincinnati this year. And I did go to a session where we heard all about the very complicated funding mechanism that was kind of led by a nonprofit to leverage a lot of different funding to rehab distressed areas in Cincinnati and to get them available for eligible low-cost housing. And, the takeaway was kind of like, we would never do this again. It was so complicated, and but we learned a lot. But I guess what I'm saying is that I think there has to be other partners involved. That might be a nonprofit housing developer or something like that, not solely through the city, but certainly an active partner in helping to make that happen.
Be okay if I sent you that article? I think it was a Wall Street Journal write-up a few years ago, and see if that rings any bells with what you were hearing more recently.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and Leslie raises a really good point. A lot of times, nonprofits play a key role in this type of work because the unit of government may have restrictions on it, especially with money that the nonprofits don't, but they're still still eligible for various grants, philanthropic donations, and things like that. So that's one way to get it done, is utilizing that nonprofit sector. I read a very lengthy article last night because I noticed I had 34 tabs open on my phone because I'd like to just save articles for the future, and it gave me anxiety. So it was about the housing reform that Portland went through. But to read it, that was a strong takeaway, is all the nonprofits that were involved in that effort, and the key role that they played. So.
And I would say that Cincinnati and Portland have a lot more units to rehab, I would imagine, than we do.
So that's the other thing too. So we are a population of just under 16,000, and we get about $300,000 a year in CDBG funding. Where when you look at some of these larger cities, they're at $310,000. In Cincinnati, they probably get like $3 million a year. So they can fund. That's one thing we talked about through the planning program, is some of the eligible programs or process, some of the CDBG programs that are eligible for reimbursement, we just don't have enough money to actually do those programs, if that makes sense. like the housing rehab. Port Huron does it because they get like $1.5 million each year, so they can do a lot with that, where the overhead of just the program, we wouldn't have much impact in how many people we can serve.
But what if we partnered with nonprofits?
Yeah, and, that's something to consider. And the CDBG funding, for the time being, will keep coming every year. And so we have a 5-year, high-level, like, umbrella plan that sets priorities. But then every year, you develop a work plan that has to be consistent with that, and correct me if I'm wrong. So you have the opportunities to modify a little bit every year underneath those guiding umbrellas, and then every 5 years, you reassess your needs and priorities and create a new 5-year plan.
Sounds like we all have a lot to learn, and if the different bodies make it a priority, sounds like there's things that we could make happen over time, so that's a good part.
Can
Any-
I? Yeah, I was gonna say, to kind of piggyback on what Debbie said about a learning op, can you guys bring action, like things that we can actually do to the table? Like, I'm not saying certain projects, just like broadly speaking, these are the things the planning commission can actually do to address all of these things. Because there was a lot of information that Ryan threw at us,
Yeah.
and I'm looking at it, I'm like, what of this can we actually do?
Yeah, and, the planning commission oversees zoning.
Right.
Land use essentially.
Mhm.
And so the zoning was a huge lift last
Right.
year towards that. But as we discussed in December and January, there's still more work to be done.
Yeah.
Because again, we said throughout the process that the zoning reform is but one lever to the housing issue. There's other things that need to happen too, like what we heard from the housing commission earlier tonight. Like projects like that also need to happen, which are
Right.
separate from the zoning reform. And so, yeah, all of these different pieces need to come into play. So, yeah, we can kind of focus on that. I think it was back in August when we were at the city commission, we talked about how, there's the affordability and the availability. The availability is largely tied to land use and what we permit places, and that's more the purview of the planning commission.
Right.
The affordability, dealing with incentives and enacting policies for certain programs, that is more of a city commission purview. So that's kind of the split there.
I've read a lot of books, a lot of articles. I probably have 34 tabs open as well with
Good.
articles
Not
about
alone
it.
in
I'm
that.
like, I'm at a point where I'm like tired of learning about it.
what
Yeah.
And I just want to know like what we can actually do.
Yep.
I think our master plan draft does call out some things, like the pattern book
Mm-hmm.
and possibly additional zoning amendments. Low-hanging fruit
Yeah.
that could be really effective.
Other comments? I think that was it, right? 'Cause now my computer has decided to go to sleep. Just in case anyone is wondering about the master plan, what's happening with that, Sean, Ann, and I made a presentation to the city commissioner on the larger 500-page document that you're all familiar with. Next Monday is the Mobility Action Plan, and I want to say August, I believe, 12th is the magazine, or the 65-page document that we are presenting. So just so you know, it's moving along through the process.
Separate issue.
Okay.
Were you done?
Did you sign them?
All right. Do you have those minutes there?
What minutes?
Yeah, with who made the motions and stuff?
Yeah, I have all that stuff.
So Katie just brought to our attention, and we apologize, but we may have you restate the motions and change the August 6th to August 7th. August 6th is an election night, so
Okay,
our
so I
meeting
had
got
August
moved to the
7th on
7th.
my
Yeah, that's a good
calendar.
point.
and I was
It's
like,
on
this
our,
is
it's
weird.
even on the master sheet,
Okay,
but
okay.
Dum Dum Ding Dong, who was sitting there
I
just looking
like
at a
went
regular
and changed
calendar.
it
not
on my
paying attention.
calendar.
Yeah, so just for the sake of procedural accuracy, we may have you restate those motions.
You have to do them one at a time, or?
I would do them one at a time, yeah, and then vote
Okay,
on them
in
individually.
order?
But
Let me-
not the master plan one, but just the rezoning.
Not
so-
that
Oh,
one?
not
Okay.
that one?
That one's also August.
That one
Yeah,
does say
all
August
three of
6th.
them.
I said 6
Oh, I'm sorry.
for mine.
It does. It
They're
has
all
to be
August
all three.
So
Okay.
Anna,
Yep, I go first.
you did Anna did the first two.
I move to set a public hearing in consideration of the draft master plan with the subtopic mobility action plan included at the planning commission regular meeting on Wednesday, August 7th, 2024.
Do we have to revote?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, wouldn't you,
First, who was the second?
Shay made the second.
Oh, second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, move to the next one, please.
I think that one is also me. One moment, please. Oh my
I know we were
goodness.
moving.
I move that the request initiated by Alex McKenzie of Coldwell Banker Commercial Schmidt Realtors to amend section 1358.01 of the Traverse City Code of Ordinances to add offices, legal services, business services, insurance, and real estate services as allowed uses in the H1 Hospital District, set for a public hearing at the Planning Commission regular meeting on Wednesday, August 7th, 2024.
Who was the second on that?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
That would be me.
Roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Swanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Hershey,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
No.
Commissioner Knapp,
Yes.
Commissioner Deturi,
Yes.
Commissioner Heller.
Yes. Motion carries. Do we have another one?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah, we
This
set
was
3.
Shay
That
and
was
then
me.
David.
Shay and David.
I move that the request initiated by Andrew Mollison of Alliance Architects authorized applicant for the Traverse City Housing Commission to rezone the property commonly located at 10,200 East Carter Road and commonly known as Orchard View Apartments from RC Residential Conservation District to R3 Multiple Family Dwelling District be set for a public hearing at the Planning Commission regular meeting on Wednesday, August 7th, 2024.
Second.
Have a motion and a support. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I think that was it, right?
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, sorry
I'm glad
about
we caught
that.
it now.
Yeah, that way we don't have to call a special meeting tomorrow and bring it
Thank
all
the
back.
Lord. Okay. Do we have any more public comment for anything we've heard tonight? Thank you so much for being here, though. And we adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody,
Thank
for
you.
being here. Go enjoy summer.
Well, we're going to get in the habit of doing that really quickly then, if we have to do that every meeting. Also, none of us remembered, like,